Good afternoon, everyone. And I'm Ulviye Isik, and I work as a researcher at University of Utrecht at the Department of Biomedical Sciences. And now I'm working in a project team focusing on diversity and inclusiveness among students in order to create a safe and inclusive learning environment. And today I'm going to tell you about the most important findings of my thesis, which I've defended in November 2019. First of all, I will tell you something about the background, why we started researching this topic. Then I will tell you about the most important findings, which came out of 5 different studies. And I will close my presentation with the practical implications. First of all, the title of my thesis is Motivation and Academic Performance of Ethnic Minority Medical Students, Struggling and Coping in the Path from Student to Doctor. I want to start with the research team. My promoter was Gerda Crozet, and Rashmi Kusukar and Anouk Wouters were my co-promoters. And as you can see, different co-authors were involved in this research. First of all, about the background, the reason that we have started this research is, as you might know, diversity in the patient population is increasing. And think, for example, of ethnic diversity. In order to meet the needs of this population, diversity among health professionals is essential. However, from research, we know that medical students from ethnic minorities are experiencing difficulties in successfully completing their education. For example, research has shown that ethnic minority students underperform compared to the majority students. They achieve fewer credits and are more likely to fail for examinations as compared to the majority students. Then the Netherlands is the setting in which we conducted the research. And as you know, the Netherlands has a large ethnically diverse population. In January 2018, there were nearly 200 non-Dutch nationalities in the Netherlands. And in this thesis, we used the definition of Statistic Netherlands. And ethnic minority was defined as a person born in or outside the Netherlands, with at least one parent born outside the Netherlands. And based on this ethnicity, we can make a division in 3 groups. Like Liane also explained, people from the majority group, people from a Western minority background, and people from non-Western minority backgrounds. And in some of our studies, we have considered these 3 groups. And as you can see on the screen, in 2017, in the year that we have conducted the studies, 77% was from the Dutch majority, 13% from the non-Western minority, and 10% was from the Western minority. Now, like I said, medical students from ethnic minorities have problems in successfully completing their education. They underperform as compared to the majority group. And further, from research, we also know that motivation plays an important role in study success among medical students. The factors that influence the motivation of ethnic minority students and the mechanism were studied in this thesis. And research has shown that motivation has association with better well-being of students and is associated with better study results. And what do we mean with motivation? In our thesis, we have used the self-determination theory. The self-determination theory considers what type of motivation someone has. It's a bit more complicated, but broadly we can say that someone can be autonomously motivated or in a controlled way. And to give you an idea, someone who is autonomously motivated finds medicine and helping patients fascinating and important. And someone who is controlled motivated is, for example, attracted by the status of a doctor. And autonomous motivated is the most desirable type as compared to the controlled motivation. And like I said before, autonomous motivated students are also performing better in their education, are feeling better as compared to the students who are controlled motivated. Next slide. So the broad research questions in this thesis were: what are the factors that influence the motivation of ethnic minority students, and what are the underlying mechanisms? And we also consider the motivation, how the motivation influenced their academic performance. And to answer these questions, we have conducted 5 studies. As I said before, these are all published now. And in the next slides, I will explain you more in detail about the important findings. First of all, we have conducted a systematic review in order to create an overview of the factors that may influence the motivation of ethnic minority students. And in this study, we have considered the general academic motivation of, or the school-related motivation of the students from elementary school onward. And we, regardless of which motivation theory has been used as a framework, we didn't want to miss any factor at all based on the framework that has been used. And the factor that we have been found could be that could positively or negatively influence the motivation could be classified as individual factors, such as well-being, family-related factors, such as family support, and school-related factors, such as study results, and social factors. Think of perceived discrimination by the students. And some results, we have seen that especially ethnicity, discrimination-related factors, and limited knowledge of the majority language seem to be factors for ethnic minority students. And we have seen that almost every factor was identified in a single study. So there was more research into the factor is needed. And we have seen that little research in higher education has been conducted. Only 8 out of the 45 included studies were conducted in higher education. And we didn't find any article in medication at all. So next step, we zoomed in at the medical study. And we conducted a cross-sectional study aimed to compare the 2 types of motivation. The 2 types of motivation, autonomous and controlled motivation of ethnic minority students in Western, non-Western, and the majority students were compared. And their association with the academic performance was also considered. And the data from this study was collected from an already existing longitudinal study, the Student Motivation and Success Study. And we sent all students an electronic questionnaire, a survey, and we had a response rate of almost 39%. We have seen some different findings, like the autonomous motivation of non-Western students was higher than the Dutch majority group in preclinical and clinical education. Further, we have seen that controlled motivation of Western students was higher than the Dutch majority students. And we have seen that the grade point average of the Western students was higher than the non-Western minority students, only in clinical education. Further, we have seen that the autonomous motivation of the Dutch students was associated with a higher GPA, only the preclinical phase. And the autonomous motivation of Western students was also related with a higher GPA of Western students, only in the clinical phase. Further, we have not find no significant differences in performance. there were no significant differences between the ethnic groups. So we have found different relations. So we couldn't explain all of these results. So we thought, okay, as a next step, we can let's consider this whether study strategy can explain the relation between the motivation and the academic performance of the students. So we considered the type of study strategy as a mediator between the variables autonomous motivation and academic performance. And what do we mean with study strategy? The survey strategy, that's the rote learning or memorizing the study materials. The achieving strategy of the student was considered, and that's the effective use of time and space. And the deep strategy, which means the maximize meaning in the study materials, which is also the most desirable type of study strategy. What have we found in this research? One of the most important findings was that achieving strategy was a mediator between the autonomous motivation and the grade point average for Dutch majority medical students only. For the other groups, we didn't have found study strategy as a mediator. Further, we have seen that other factors, so one of the conclusions was that other factors seem to play a role in the motivation of ethnic minority medical students for the non-Western and the Western minority groups. So we thought, okay, the next step is doing some qualitative research is needed to find out what factors influence the motivation and performance of the students. So then we started with a focus group study to find out which factors influence the motivation of the students from ethnic minorities and to investigate what the experiences of these students are and how these experiences influence the motivation of them. So we conducted 6 focus groups, 3 with bachelor students, so the preclinical students, and 3 with master students, the clinical students, and only with ethnic minorities. And a total of 26 students participated in the study. And to show you some quotes about what we found, like you can read in this quote, othering, the theme othering, not belonging, came up. Students discussed interactions in practice in which othering played a role. And this participant expressed how they, referring to the ethnic minority students, did not fit into the team, or in the department team because of cultural differences. They had the feelings of not belonging. And there is another example here where cultural differences played a role. I gave you the time to read it. So, and then in our last study, which also was a qualitative study, we also have investigated the ethnic minority students' experiences. But in this study, we additionally investigated what they need to become or to stay motivated and to perform to their full potential. So we asked the students some support tips based on their experiences. In this study, a total of 80 students from different ethnic minorities in all years were interviewed. Interviews with these students revealed that there is a lack of a medical network. Further, another example is that they, what I mentioned also in the other study, they lack a sense of belonging to the medical environment because of cultural differences, and they miss role models from ethnic minorities. So there was some overlap between these qualitative studies, which also confirms that is highly needed among these students. And students gave some support tips, which I will show you later on, but they give you an example. They wish to be facilitated in building and maintaining a network. Different students expressed that the role models can be supportive and motivating. Think of such a teacher or a mentor with a migration background. And then last but not least, the practical implication of this thesis. And some support tips to create a better learning environment for medical students from ethnic minorities. I have picked out a few which came out of this thesis. I have placed it, it's a lot of text, but I wanted to be as precise as possible because I think this is the most important part of the thesis and the part which we should work on in practice to make progress in this. The first theme was, for example, an inclusive learning environment, and the implication that we have given is create an environment in the medical environment where students can, where students with an ethnic minority background can feel that they have a place. This would contribute to their feeling of relatedness. Another theme is cultural awareness and competence. Educate the medical staff and students about the culture of medicine and about how to communicate about ethnic differences and create a cultural awareness and competence. And due to this, it might be far less likely that there will be remarks about accents or being exception. And it would also help for miscommunication, and for students not being assertive could also be prevented. Further, the cultural background and expectations. We have given the implication to take the students' cultural background into account and guide the students in a sensitive manner and give them the space to give more clarity about what expected is of them. And supervisors need to understand that collectivistic ethnic minority culture discourage students from being assertive, and they find it difficult to be assertive in clinical environments. And this would help to prevent misunderstanding based on the cultural differences. And the role models, which I have mentioned before. So we give the application to more visible teachers and mentors in the medical education. Further, they came out of the interview study. We asked students to give support tips, what they need. So these are from the students themselves. And about the experiences of discrimination, they gave, as you can see, for example, they wish to have a support group with students to discuss experiences of discrimination. Like I said before, they lack of a medical network. They want guidance in it. And this is, I didn't mention this before. Another point is about the cultural communication differences and language difficulties. They want to have guidance in their communication skills and to overcome language barriers. And training to be assertive is also mentioned before. And a lack of sense of belonging, which I have mentioned before, but the support tip that the students gave is, for example, they wanted to have more inclusive introduction days at the beginning of the study to make it attractive for them, for a diverse group of students, because they associated in general now with a lot of beer drinking among students. They don't feel a sense of belonging in those surroundings. So that was short about my thesis, and here are the references. And are there any questions